It
My
it makes you
God.
it makes you feel so dirty about something so normal, and you then get this sort of idea that now you're tainted, that you're not
Uh-uh.
fit. And that was
Like,
something I was
no
always scared
boy,
about.
Shame on you, Kim.
no
Shame on
man
you.
will ever love me
No,
because, like, I've
you
been
kiss
touched
the boy.
already. And it's just,
Yeah.
Let's get into this. By the
I,
way, hello everybody for being here today. We have a panel. We have a panel to talk about purity culture within the organization, and specifically how it affects women. Because I think we hear a lot about this from a lot of male like content creators out there, but we want to get a different perspective, look at this through a different lens. And I did just want to kind of go around the table and just get folks' names and date of birth and social security numbers and post those in chat. So it's really easy for me to copy and paste. No, just maybe Jenny, you could kick us off. Just give us like a brief recap of your life, totally encapsulate everything about you as a person in about 60 seconds. Go.
well, my name is Jenny. I was born and raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses in what you would call a divided household. My dad was born in, but he was never baptized until he hit retirement age. My mom was an adult convert, so I kind of grew up a little bit in and out, but mostly in from my perspective. I was baptized in 2003. I was 17, so I was already getting a little old, and people were questioning, you know, how devout I was if I didn't get baptized. I pioneered for 2 years, and I eventually woke up at the age of 32. That was a couple of years ago. And everything kind of spiraled out from there. I sometimes write on a blog called Bones in Bloom. I'll be getting back to that in the next few weeks to months, writing more content for that. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. That was perfect. Cam, same question. Who are you? What are you all about? Just every nuance of you as a person in about a minute. There you go.
so I joined the Jehovah's Witnesses after my mom was preached to at the door. I think I was around the age of like 8 or 9. So I still have like the memories of like the before time, of like Christmases and birthdays and all those fun things. My dad was not a believer for a long time. But we took a trip to Brazil, and one of the stipulations that my mom gave was that we had to attend a meeting. So he saw a meeting in his own language, and he saw like how she was using her English magazine, and he was using the Portuguese magazine, and it lined up. And then shortly after that, we found a Portuguese congregation in our area, and he made progress. Eventually, was baptized. My mom became a pioneer, and then my dad also became a ministerial servant. So I had like a lot of expectations put on me of what I was going to be and who I should become in the truth. um, and then I got baptized at I think the age of 12, and I left at the age of 18, and I've been out ever since.
Very good. Thank you, and thanks for being here. This
Yeah.
is
Thanks for
awesome.
having me.
Oh no, it's great. Dax, same deal. What's your deal? And do tell us the name of the dog in the background too.
The dog, that's Benny.
I
He
always forget
is
Benny's.
a rescue dog, and he is not potty trained, even though he's 2.5 years old, almost 3.
Wow, so things might get real exciting here on the
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
video. Okay, cool.
So my dad is Catholic, and my mom is a witness. And the reason so my mom was disfellowshipped long before I was born, and was still disfellowshipped when I was born. But my brothers were in and out of Californian detentionary schools. And then when I was 2, my brother joined MS-13, which is a drug cartel. And my dad decided, you know what? Even though I believe that the witnesses are cults, I want my kids raised in it, because then they can make the decision when they're adults. Because he didn't really understand the shunning arrangement. So I got baptized at 13, and I left about officially left this month, but I really mentally left in January. And And yeah, and now here I am, caught between a bunch of worldly family who I don't really know but seem to care about me ferociously, which is great, and a bunch of witness family who seems very keen to throw me under the rug. So
Differently
or throw me under
ferocious.
the bus, not the rug. The rug is when you hide something. The bus is when you really want to get it out there. So yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much for being on the channel. So I wanted to start out with kind of getting a sense of when this first started affecting you. I think that people generally know what we mean by purity culture. And does anybody have like a definition of like what that means to them? Like, I feel like intuitively I know what it means. And if somebody says that there is a purity culture in Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm like, yes, that sounds true. But I don't know if I could easily define it.
I think purity culture is just an all across the board repression of any sexual thought or desire or impulse that you have, regardless of your age, often regardless of your marital status. I think purity culture is devastating in a lot of ways. You're trying to remain clean and pure, but we're humans and that's not how we operate.
Yeah. And I would add there's also a bunch of arbitrary rules. For example, you can see this in a lot of school dress codes as well as at meetings. Don't show the shoulders, as if the shoulders are this huge sexual organ, which they are not. They're shoulders. And nobody bats an eye at, a boy running around by the swimming pool with his shirt off, but a girl's swimsuit just shows a little too much stomach and it's the end of the world. So purity culture is also used to sexualize bodies in ways that don't make sense, in ways that even like the Victorian era people and before that did not sexualize bodies to the extent that WASP moms do. So.
And I would add that there's a component of guilt for like feeling those emotions or for like feeling that natural human impulse. There's a lot of guilt associated with that too, which is kind of enforced by all of those rules and all of those like the meetings and stuff.
Yeah, I find it frustrating that Christians, especially evangelicals, will look out into the world and say, oh, look at them sexualizing and grooming our children. But these same institutions, including Jehovah's Witnesses, who by nature claim to be spirit-directed or inspired of God, who are supposed to be protecting these children, first sexualize them and then heap guilt upon them for feeling sexualized. So it's very counterintuitive. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. They expose you to sex very early and then punish you for exploring those sexual feelings that you have.
Yeah, that's great. Wait, no, it's not great. Why did I say that's great? It's all very bad.
It's great that we explained it.
Your replies were great. The way you explained it was great. And obviously, witnesses and other evangelical groups like have reasonings for this that they base on the Bible about being presenting your body as a temple and as a living sacrifice, but these things have real effects on real human beings, often very harmful ones, and it starts at a young age. So Cam, maybe you can kick us off like with from a young age, like at what point did you start to like experience or notice this?
So I actually have an experience that I experienced when I was a kid. I was 12 years old. And I don't know how to put this in a way that doesn't sound weird, but let's just say I developed quite early when I was a kid.
Same. That's not weird.
So when, at 12, I remember, at the time I wasn't wearing a bra and I went to the meeting and I was 12. So I didn't really think much of it, because I was a kid. The elders pulled my parents aside on that night and, told them that I needed to wear a bra because I was stumbling other brothers. And I, looking back, or in the moment, I thought like, oh my God, I can't, stumble my brothers, I have to wear a bra, even though like they were uncomfortable and, I didn't particularly enjoy the experience. I was like, I have to do it because I don't want to stumble my brothers. But looking back, I think, who the fuck was being stumbled by a 12-year-old?
Well,
Those 12-year-old mosquito bites. Who is that enticing? That's the problem.
Even if you're a 12-year-old who is well endowed, the fact that somebody can... It should not be a 12-year-old's responsibility to control the sexual urges of other people. And the problem is when you're 12 years old and somebody says you need to cover up, well, they're the adult. And so obviously you're going to take them seriously and you're going to take it to heart. You're going to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I should be more modest.
Yeah.
And then everything you do after that is colored by, is this modest? Is this modest enough? Am I stumbling somebody? And it becomes oppressive.
You internalize that shame that they've given to you over your body, which you have no control over. Because like you, Cam, I mean, I was in training bras at 10 years old, right? I was growing out of bras faster than my mom could buy them. We didn't have a lot of money. So the majority of my clothes were hand-me-downs or from Walmart or something like that. So nothing fit well. So like you, I mean, I would show up to meeting and my cup runneth over. I'm like 12, 13 years old and my bras aren't fitting correctly. And there was so much shame, especially from my dad's sisters who were JWs. They were like my worst critics and they were always there to body shame me and make me feel like I was purposely trying to be enticing, even though I was just, I didn't know how to wear clothes. I was a kid. I was a child.
Yeah. And looking back, I look at it like, why was I the one that was being punished for this? Why was I the one that was being called out? Why was it not the brothers who were being stumbled by a 12-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could stop down on that real quick in the sense of being stumbled, because that is kind of a JW specific phrase. What does that mean, being stumbled?
Nobody knows. That's the issue.
I think it's like you like, for example, wearing like a low cut shirt or like a tight skirt or something makes someone stumble or not be able to continue in their faith the way they once were because of what you were wearing or because of, some action you took. And it was, not even just, the clothes you wear or, it is like if you watched a violent movie and someone found out about it, that could stumble that person and make them lose their faith.
And like stumbling itself, it's either you're offended by the actions of somebody else that you have assigned moral value to, which you shouldn't, or you excuse your bad behavior, and I do put that in air quotes because bad behavior for witnesses is everything you ever do. But, you excuse your bad behavior by, well, that person led me to do that. They're the reason that I did that. So I was stumbled. And, it's
putting blame on a third party for your own weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's like, well, that rock tripped me. Yeah, it's actually just a pebble, but it tripped me. I was stumbled by it. It's really, really stupid.
When really you didn't. Your shoelaces were tied together and you walked by the rock. Like, that's what stumbling actually is.
Yes.
It's never the fault of the rock. It's the fault of the person who's walking.
Well, and what's always frustrated me is the talks are always, don't allow yourself to be stumbled, and also don't stumble others. Which is it? Don't stumble others. But at the same time, if you're stumbled by something, that's on you. So is it on you or is it on them? Which is it? Are you in the wrong because you got stumbled, or are they in the wrong because they stumbled you? Which is it?
That was
Make
the
up your
whole thing.
mind.
That was the whole thing that was one of the things that kind of led to me waking up, was I was having issues with that exact concept, because I was like, it doesn't make sense. I said, somebody could be stumbled by the color red. So should I not wear the devil's color to meeting because someone else might be bothered by it? There's no scriptural backing to it. So am I at fault, or are they just weak? Like, it didn't make sense to me. And yeah, it's an absurd thing.
Yeah.
I really, the way you articulate that is perfect, because this is something that is a paradox, and it's almost intentionally making it so that everybody is constantly failing and everybody is constantly at fault for being offended or offending somebody else. But you always have to concede to the most conservative conscience, because even though you're not supposed to be easily offended, you're also not supposed to offend anybody. So
Mhm.
even though they shouldn't be offended, well, you shouldn't be offended them.
Yes, but the doctrine itself really lends itself to the idea that if they are offended, that was the maximum that their morality would allow, and so therefore they're trying their best.
Right.
Because you couldn't look at a 10-year-old with spaghetti straps. Okay, like F you. Sorry, like that's just really dumb. It's so dumb.
I have if you want to keep rolling with random stories, I've got a couple.
Yep, keep going.
So again, this comes from my father's side of the family. They were some of my biggest critics in regards to my body, in regards to my sexuality. For some reason, I think it was because they were in the truth and my dad wasn't. So therefore I was the bad one. I was bad association from the time I was a toddler to like, even worse now that I'm an apostate. But there was always that nitpicky thing. And so you ladies might understand this. When you're developing and you hit puberty, you constantly have that fear of like your period starting, like you're going to stand up and your period's going to start. And another thing that you're constantly afraid of is we all knew that one person who accidentally tucked their skirt into their underwear and then walked out of the bathroom. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
I
my
was
sister.
so terrified. I was so terrified of that happening to me, or even just like standing up for a song and my like skirt being up, like somehow Satan tucked it into my undies or something. I was terrified of that. And so even if I was wearing a long skirt, what I tended to do is while we were singing the song, I would kind of gather up the material like tight on me to like hold it. So I like my brain was secure that like no one can, like I'm covered, no one can see me, I'm fine. My aunt was sitting behind us at meeting one time and saw me doing this, right? I'm just holding my skirt tight because I have this fear that like someone's going to see my undies, or that like maybe I've started bleeding and I don't know it, and maybe that will hold the blood. I don't know. I had these weird thoughts that you have as an adolescent that don't make sense. And she lectures my mom after the meeting, and she lectures me in front of her about how I'm holding it really tight and it's showing off my butt and it's really inappropriate. And I'm just like,
and I was actually
go ahead. It's like
I was going to counter you with I did the opposite. So I didn't have a fear of my period starting because it started at the age of 10, like a knife stabbing me through the heart. Like it was completely not expected at all, and I was camping, so awesome. Yeah, there's no supplies at campgrounds.
I'll just kind of in my panties.
Yeah, basically.
Bear bait now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I used to do the opposite. Every time I'd stand up for a meeting, I would quickly shift my like skirt back so that way it wasn't hugging my butt. And I'd also, because I was nervous, because I'm a sweaty person, and I'd be nervous that like maybe I would sweat and it would go through my skirt. When I sit, and I still do this, I pull my skirt sideways, and then when I stand, I shift it back straight.
Interesting.
Like as I stand, I shift it back. It's really dumb.
But we have these strange quirks from those types of weird fears.
No one must know that I have crotch sweat. It's just a me problem.
We all have it.
No, just a me problem. Nobody else. I'm the one that has it.
And then one more like strange story. I don't want to hog everyone's time, but
you're good.
I was 13. Britney Spears was popular, and I had her CD. And I was over at my cousin's because I spent a lot of time with them. We homeschooled together. They were my age. They were my best friends. And so I pop in Britney Spears and I'm listening to, her album. One of the last songs that she had on there was a cover of The Beat Goes On by Sonny and Cher. And there's, it's kind of drum heavy, and it's very like, it's not very poppy. It's kind of a mellow, like, la-di-da-di-di. Like, and there were some, drums in there. And I like the song. My uncle decides to inform me that a lot of African tribes use drums during sex rituals.
Oh my God.
And it's probably not a song I should be listening to. And that's the frustrating thing about purity culture is all this stuff about sex before you really even know what sex is.
But that's
right?
also so racist.
It is very racist. It is so racist and so uncomfortable. And the last thing I wanted to hear from my uncle was that this song was very sexual, when like in my brain, I loved Sonny and Cher at the time. Like I used to watch them on Nick at Night, the reruns. I loved them. So I really liked this song. And like now, whenever I hear that song, that's the memory that pops up, is my uncle being like, you know what, drugs, use this for sex. Like, it's so strange. Why would you say that to a child? Why would you say that to a child? Why not just let them enjoy their weird song? They don't understand what's like, they don't understand. Like, it's just drums. I'm spitting. I'm sorry. I'm very fired up about this. Like,
It's dumb. Yeah, I get it.
Taking the most innocent things and sexualizing it and making you feel guilty that that adult thinks of something sexually and it's your fault.
I think one of the things that's like frustrating looking back on stuff like that is it's so clear that it says more about the adult than it does the child. Like, why is your brain going there and projecting this onto a child? But you know, you don't have that kind of perspective when you're young.
I had a drawer essentially full of like undershirts, you know, like shirts that I could wear like under my dresses, because, you know, as someone who, like, you know, by the age of 14, 15 was, you know, wearing quite a large cup size, I had a lot of and obviously dresses were kind of like low cut, so it was really hard to find clothing that was like appropriate,
especially at the time.
Yeah. So I was, you know, 14, 15 with a drawer just filled with like tank top undershirts that I would wear under all of the clothes that I had, because everything else was just, you know, would make me too sexual according to my parents. And it was like, why does it matter?
Did you guys wear boleros?
Yes.
No.
I didn't either. I refused. I hated them. I thought they were obnoxious. So I wore blazers instead. Like, if I had something that was too low cut, I would wear a blazer. Or if it had spaghetti straps, I wore a blazer. I was like, nothing will make me wear a bolero. Nothing.
Are you talking, okay, when you say bolero, are you talking about the shrugs? The shrugs that kind of like tie like in the front, or
no, it's this.
They're like it's this you wear over your stuff.
It is this dumb little cap sleeved cardigan thing that also is like circular, so it kind of comes down around your bust. It's only like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We call them shrugs. I don't remember. It's the 2000s,
but it doesn't close.
Right. Well, some of them had a clasp and some of them didn't,
and they looked really silly. Because at the time, we wore long shirts. So here's the outfit you would wear. You'd wear a long A-line skirt and probably a tank top that went over the skirt. It wasn't tucked in. It went over and over your butt.
Yeah,
and then
very
you had
long.
Dumb bolero over it. Oh, it was awful.
So I wore one time. I was trying to be stylish for district convention, and my grandmother saw me and said, "Huh, you're wearing a boob warmer."
That's what they are. They're so dumb.
I never wore it again. I was like, I'm just trying to be cool. Why do I always look like a nerd?
Because you're trying to be cool by witness standards. It doesn't exist.
I was trying to dress modest, friendly, and apparently it put too much emphasis on the ladies.
I just had to Google bolero, but it was worth it. I knew exactly what it was as soon as I saw it. It is 100% part of the witness fit for sure.
Back in the 2000s.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, still, I mean, it's a thing. I wanted to ask, you know, my experience as like a teenager in the organization is like still being in a position where, like, as a young baptized male, you're still put in charge of like adult women, which is so weird to me. It was weird then. It was weird then. It's weird, way weirder now. But did you have experiences with that, of basically like other teenagers who are basically your age being able to like tell you what to do?
I didn't actually. I didn't have that experience until I was an adult. And even then, it didn't bother me as much, as I just kind of like cringed for them. Like, they didn't see it as cringe, but I knew that all of the sisters in the Pioneer group were just like, this guy, right? And so it was more cringy than it was like frustrating. It was more frustrating when you had like a domineering older brother who, or young brother who's an adult, who would do the same thing and be kind of like an a-hole about it. But the teenagers were often so embarrassed that I didn't personally have a negative experience with that, but I do know that some people have had negative experiences as teenagers with other teenagers trying to take headship over them, even though none of them are married. You're not their dad. Like, chill, bro. You're 16. So
I was gonna say, like, y'all had teenage brothers in your congregation?
we did. They were all disfellowshipped, so it's fine.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, we did, but I never had an experience where they were in charge because they were, again, like you said, they were embarrassed or young, or they just weren't ever in that position. So it was generally like, it wasn't until after I got married that I started to see that kind of ridiculous thing happen.
And it's more ridiculous than anything else. That is not what makes women feel oppressed. That is what makes women feel like, this is so dumb. This is so dumb. I am putting myself in a position willingly that this scenario is happening. And it doesn't stumble you as much as you just feel like, this is ridiculous. Jehovah, please fix this. Like, this is wrong. So
there was a time after I was married, and my ex, he struggled a lot with the ministry, and I don't want to like share too much of his story or anything, but we had been put in a car group of other sisters, and it was him. He was the only male, and he was not comfortable taking the lead. He just wasn't. Like, ministry made him nervous. He was young. He wasn't a ministerial servant or anything, and yet they were all like, okay, tell us where to go, tell us what to do. And he was not comfortable with that at all. And so he had all this pressure on him on top of the pressure of being out in the ministry. And so I just think about the brothers who don't want to have to be in that position to tell these sisters who were out every single day out in service and who know the territory and know what to do and know how to operate. He had to tell them, and he doesn't have all this experience like they do. And it was just really uncomfortable for him. And he felt a little bit bullied because they were like, where do we go next? Like, you need to tell us, direct us. He goes, I don't know how to read the map.
Well, and unfortunately, I feel like experiences like that reinforce in a lot of brothers' minds that their position is a burden. Instead of understanding that if they were actually doing what the religion told them to do, and they were out in service regularly, and they were making those sacrifices, it wouldn't be a burden because you would know what you're doing. But instead, it like reinforces in a lot of men's minds in the congregation that clearly women need us to lead, and this is such a burden that I'm taking on. Meanwhile, there's all these like 80-year-old sisters who are like, I could do this with my eyes closed, and you need to sit down, but they can't do that. So
well, according to my elders, their wives are so grateful that they don't have to take on the responsibilities that they have.
I hate when people say that. I hate it so much.
I'm glad I don't have to give public talks.
Yeah, anytime I'm like, oh, I wish I could give public talks, they're like, well, my wife, or the wife will be like, oh, well, I feel. I'm like, well, good for you. I don't feel that way. So, like, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Cam, what's your experience with that?
Just wanted to do a Bible reading.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to do.
I might still be JW if they just let me do a Bible reading.
The one that comes to mind is we were going out on service once, and we all were together. There was no brother there. The only person there was my younger brother, who I think at the time I think he was probably like 15 years old. He wasn't baptized. And so my mom led the service group, and she put on her little, like, they didn't have like a head covering. So she got like a dish towel from like the kitchen and like put it over her head.
You're not even allowed to do that.
Dignified. A dish towel on your head is so dignified.
A dish towel on her head to lead the service group. And then of course a brother walks in, a 16-year-old brother walks in. And she was like, oh, you can take over the service group. Like, you can take over. And it's like the 16-year-old is giving the prayer when it's like my mom, who, like you said, was out on service, every day, knew the territory like the back of her hand. But no, the 16-year-old brother comes in and he takes over because, of course, he has to.
It's so disrespectful. Honestly, it is so disrespectful and so infantilizing and so gross. I hate it so much. It's bad.
To the point that you brought out, Dax, about it kind of reinforcing the fact that like, oh, this is taking on a burden in the congregation and sisters need direction. I think for like people of like my generation who are similar to me, and like I thought they were physically and mentally out when I left. I think it's because for me, when I was in those positions, it added to this sense of like, Jehovah knows this is all just silly. You know, it's in the Bible. The men have to take the lead, but we all know that like sisters are in charge and we're just doing this to, you know, to follow direction. But it's not really a sexist organization because look at this.
The sister is the neck that controls the head.
Oh my
I don't know
god.
if you guys heard that one.
That, and I feel very sad that there are a few people in the organization that feel like, well, we all know this is silly, because we don't. There are so many men that don't know that it's silly, because I've met those men and they hate me. So I know for a fact that there are so many people in the organization, so many people in positions of power or positions of influence, if they're not in positions of power, that like the people who influence what happens in the congregation do not think it's silly. They honestly believe that women view it as a what's it called? An honorable thing to be submissive, or they don't care.
Yeah.
Not that I should speak on their behalf, but they did say many times, husband of Dax, control your wife. So I'm a little bitter, but it's fine.
Dax, you said something that you kind of wanted to get into, which is when a brother has an issue with a sister, he will not bring it to her. He either brings it to like her dad or her husband, sometimes even her boyfriend, and that's extremely infantilizing. I feel like that's something we've kind of touched on a little bit.
So infuriating. And I had this instance where we have a duplex, and I'm going to tell this story because F them. We had a duplex, and my sister and her husband lived on the other side, and they would not, no matter how much we asked, pick up the dog poop from the yard. They had a dog. We told them you can have a dog if you pick up the dog poop. They would not pick up the dog poop. My husband was constantly texting my brother-in-law saying, please pick up the dog poop. My brother-in-law, who is super, just like had no respect for my husband whatsoever, which is, you know, up to him, but still would not respond, would just, you know, ghost him on it, say when I get to it or whatever. It had been over a year. This is a Burmese mountain dog. And there were flies. It was summer. And I said, you know what? I'm their landlord. I'm just going to text them and say, hey, you have to pick it up. It has to be picked up by the end of the week. This is disgusting. So either you pick it up or we hire somebody to pick it up and you foot the bill. And that's not what I said. What I said in the message was, hi, just wanted to let you know that the dog poop has to be picked up by Friday. Thanks. I didn't get a response. My husband got a response saying, you need to control your wife. You are the head of the household, and she should not be talking to me this way. She should not be disrespecting me this way. And I instructed my husband to say, she is your landlord. And he did. And it was great. Because then my brother-in-law reached out to the elders and was like, this is whatever, right? Yeah, Jenny knows my brother-in-law. That's why she's reacting this way.
I think he had gone to the elders over that. I'm just like...
he went to the elders. He went to the elders and was like, oh, this is disrespectful. And they were like, she's your landlord.
No,
I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, she's your landlord. I don't know what to tell you. And that was it. The next day I went out and my sister was picking up the dog poop. My sister. Not him. Even though the agreement was if she doesn't want to pick it up, because he surprised her with the dog. If she doesn't want the dog and she doesn't want to pick up the poop, you have to do it. That is your responsibility. And he never once picked up the dog poop. Never once saw him back there picking up dog poop. In the 5 years that we lived there. Never once. So... But yeah, control your wife. There were a lot of instances like that where he'd say, control your wife. Or we used to go to poker nights at another witness's house. And because I was competitive, it was always like, your wife needs to be less aggressive. I wasn't even half as aggressive as the brothers that were there. And it was always just, control your wife, control your wife, control your wife. And even when I was dating my husband, people stopped coming to me to talk to me about stuff that involved me. We didn't live together. Why are you going to him? I had just moved back into town. We had only been dating for like a month and everyone stopped going to me about things that I needed to do and they went to him. We didn't even get married for almost a year after that. So, it's infantilizing. It's frustrating because even if you're married, the fact that even if you're married and you make friends with people of the opposite sex, the fact that if they have an issue with you, they will not go to you, they will go to your husband, which is bullshit, because wives will always just go to their friend. If they have a male friend, whether he's married or not, they don't go to the wife. They don't go to the wife and say, hey, I need you to talk to your husband about that. No, that doesn't happen. And I couldn't even imagine going to my friend's wife to say, hey, I have an issue with your husband that needs to be resolved and I need you to talk to him about it. I would never do that. So the fact that it's so common in the congregation for men to do this because it's the standard for absolutely no scriptural reason is garbage. And I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't know if anyone else has had a
Pam has an experience if she wants to go next, or.
I was actually never married. And I never dated in the JWs. Like, I never had an experience because, like, I was already PMO by the time that I was old enough to date. You know, by the time I was 17, I was already kind of, like, having doubts. When I was 18, 19, I was completely, totally awake. There's no chance that I was going to, you know, strap myself down in the organization like that, because I knew that the moment I got married, it would become significantly harder for me to leave. So I never got married. One example, and this is like not related, but just, you know, I was always very opinionated. Like, I was very opinionated. And I was loud. I would never, even when I was, you know, physically and mentally in, I was opinionated.
Same.
Yeah, I think all of us were the same.
Yes, 100%.
You know, my dad would tell me that I needed to chill because, you know, I was offending people. And I was like, why? I'm just saying what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I
had to scale back my sarcasm because it was upsetting people, apparently.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh, yeah, my sister said, well, I was never friends with Jenny. She was mean. Liar. She's such a liar. She's a liar. She loved you to death. She's lying.
I love her. I even sent her that little...
Yeah, no, she's lying. She's 100% lying to just make herself feel better about it.
She gave me a gift, and I still have it. Like, I threw out a lot of possessions in the divorce.
She said it as a deflection when I was like, well, what about Jenny? You know? Like, she's just, like, scooping from the bottom of the barrel for anything. But yeah, no, I think all three of us are probably extremely opinionated and have had to have those conversations and been instructed to pray for mildness, which I did. It didn't work, but I did it.
If there were situations in which I said something that was too opinionated or out of turn and it went to my husband instead of me, I didn't necessarily hear about it. I did tend to be very opinionated, and I would direct the brothers, but generally I did it in a way that was like funny, and I'd get a chuckle or be like, oh, actually that's a good idea. Like, I always felt like I garnered some kind of respect, you know, one-on-one.
I mean, my brother-in-law liked you, and he hates women, so
yeah, I was gonna say, like, he was funny. He was generally blown away sometimes. I would say something and be like, wow, you really speak your mind, and he, you know, seemed to appreciate it. It garnered good conversations. But I think the one experience that I had, the one that comes to mind that I had about brothers going over me to my husband to talk about something was I think it was in 2017. We had been asked to do watchtower comments at the assembly. And that was my first time in my entire life that I had ever been asked to do anything at an assembly or convention on stage whatsoever. And like, it was a long time coming. I mean, I don't want to delve into like my entire history because it's not purity culture related, but like, it was one of those things when I was starting to already grapple with my faith at that time. And I always questioned why Jehovah just wouldn't use me. I'm like, I have all these really great experiences and I'm trying so hard. Why isn't he like utilizing me? Like, I've got that here I am, send me attitude, and he's just like kicking me to the curb. So we get asked to do this, and I'm like, okay, like maybe Jehovah's finally paying me some attention. Like maybe this is a good thing. And, you know, again, I'm struggling with my faith, but I'm going for it. And I had begun like a process of sort of regaining control over my body. I had started going to the gym and watching what I was eating, and not 5-pound bags of Swedish fish like I had been. And so I was feeling good about myself. I had lost some weight, and I was excited to feel good and look good. So I was kind of into these 50s style dresses. So I decided to wear this dress that had a petticoat that goes under it to kind of floof it out. So we get there, we have to go do our rehearsal, and it's right after lunch. So I'm like, okay, I scarf down my lunch, I go to the bathroom. And when I go to the bathroom, I ended up pulling my petticoat up a little bit higher than I wanted it to be, but I was in such a hurry. I was like, whatever. And I just we did a rehearsal. And so I'm sitting in the back with everybody else. And my husband comes up to me and he's like, would it be possible for you to take your petticoat off? And I was like, no, it's kind of like my underwear / slip. It kind of goes with the whole outfit. Like I can't just take it off. And he's like, well, the brothers need you to remove it because your skirt is a little too short. And the brother who was on the stage when we were doing our part says there's too much exposed. My knees were exposed.
Gross.
And I was like, well, I can just pull it down a little bit because I pulled it up too high. And I know that it's up too high. I know that it's too short, but I was trying to get here in time. So I'll just run to the bathroom and pull it down. And he goes, no, they decided they just want you to have it off. And I was so angry by this. It was such a slap in the face because here I thought, okay, maybe Jehovah's finally utilizing me. Maybe this is a good thing. And then all that steam was I just deflated. And I thought to myself, I'm an adult here. Nobody came and spoke to me and said, hey, your skirt's a little on the shorter side. Is there anything you can do to fix it? No, they conferred amongst themselves. They told my husband that they wanted off, or my husband suggested I could just remove it. I don't really know the context because I wasn't included. And then they told me what to do. So I marched myself to the bathroom. I remove it. And I'm shaking. I'm carrying around this giant poofy undergarment of mine to my seat. And my skirt, because I didn't have a slip on, is now clinging to me. And as I'm walking, I'm doing that thing where I'm bent over trying to pull my skirt down because it's riding up my legs. And I'm like, this is more immodest than what I had been wearing. And with a slight adjustment, what I had been wearing would have been fine. I was literally sitting in the back waiting for my turn. I had the first comment and I had the last comment. So I couldn't even just be done after my first one. I was fighting back tears. I'm behind those school curtains and I'm just sitting there and everyone's laughing and they're all excited. And I'm just like, I don't think I believe in God. Why would he do this to me? I'm so embarrassed and I'm so angry and I'm self-conscious now. I've been working so hard to rebuild my self-esteem and feel good about my body that I had been, led to believe was not ever good enough. And I just wanted to be anywhere but there. So I finished my part and I was just kind of over it. I just deflated. I had lost all the zeal that I had been slowly trying to build back up. It was just gone. Because my knees were too damn sexy for the audience.
And if you had said anything, they would just gaslight you into being like, well, this is something you shouldn't allow yourself to be stumbled over, whether the brothers are right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's gross.
Yes, because the fallback is always well, even if you disagree, it's an opportunity to show obedience. So really, the brothers are kind of never wrong because it might just be Jehovah testing to see if you'll obey some dumb bullshit that you don't.
Yeah, have you noticed that they never test whether or not the brothers are obedient?
No, I intellectually, I know that all this stuff is bullshit, but hearing you articulate your experiences with that, it just really strikes me how cowardly and gross the whole obviously the whole patriarchal structure in general, but the way assemblies are run are especially ridiculous because women are involved a lot in demonstrations and interviews, a lot, more than a normal midweek meeting anyway. And but none of that is just communicated to the sister. It's all tell your wife this.
Yep.
So dehumanizing.
I used to be a part of a tabletop RPG. With a bunch of brothers. It started out with just them, and slowly I worked my nerdy self in there, and I got to be I had this character that I played, and it was great, and we had lots of fun. One of the things that I really struggled with was I was in the Discord group with them, but they didn't always use that. They had their own group chat, like through text messaging, and I wasn't a part of
That
it.
was separate?
That was separate. And so they'd be making plans to do stuff, and I wanted to be party to it. I'd have to wait for my spouse, who really wasn't into it anyway. He just did it because I like to relay information to me and to tell me what those plans were. So I felt like I wasn't included in that. And then when when, you know, my doubts came to surface and people found out about it, two of the members of the group were like, one was an elder and one was an MS. He's an elder now, but he was an MS at the time. Came over to like discuss it with me. After that discussion, they didn't even have the courtesy to tell me I was no longer allowed to play with them. They told my spouse. And I had a feeling, like, I saw some things in the Discord pop up that they were maybe planning something, but like, it was very obvious I was not invited to it. And so I had to ask my spouse, hey, like, did they kick me out of the group? Am I not allowed? And he just was like, he just kind of nodded, like I wasn't allowed to play with my friends anymore. And they didn't even have the courtesy to tell me directly. They called him and let him know. They're like, oh, and you're welcome to keep playing with us, but she's not allowed to anymore. And I'm just like, it's like, you know, I felt like a child, just, oh, I'm not allowed to go over there and play at their house anymore. And, you know, my mommy had to tell me, like, it was just so annoying.
There was one time, so this was kind of towards the end of my experience with the JWs. I was like over it. I was like so totally over it. Like I didn't want to do it anymore. I was like sick of pretending. I just wanted it to be done. So I wore a dress, and like the dress had like a sheer back, and I didn't wear a tank top with it because I was just like, I'm over it. Like I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't care. Like I threw on a dress because my mom was like, you have to go to the meeting. I was like, okay, I'll go. I threw on whatever dress was like clean in the closet, and I went to the meeting. I, go, to the meeting. I'm there. At the time I was like sitting and I would read like ebooks on my tablet. So I read my ebook during the meeting, and, I get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the song, and then I go back minding my own business. Fine. The meeting's over. I get into the car and I have a text message from a sister in the hall. And she's like, the text message kind of, I don't remember the exact words that were said, but it was essentially like, oh, your dress was really pretty, but, the back was really inappropriate. And, she read like Bible texts, or she sent like Bible texts and magazine articles for me to check out. And she was like, we just, want to honor Jehovah. And I never went to another meeting after that. After that, I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not ever going back. And I never went back because that particular message frustrated me, because I was like, what business is it of yours? And like, she had just gotten married. So I thought,
she's not like even an older sister. She's just some young.
She was like maybe 2 years older than I was.
No.
And
I would have been like,
just gotten married. And I thought at first, like, did her husband maybe like eye me in some way, and that's why she's upset or something? Like, what's the deal here?
So Cam, like when you mentioned that, like she sent you Bible scriptures, I was thinking to myself, there is not one scripture in the Bible that talks about modesty in regards to clothing.
Yep.
And that's what infuriates me about modesty in that purity culture, is that there's scriptures about modesty in regards to wealth and showing off your wealth and what
like,
you're wearing, but not about a sheer back on your dress or how little clothing you're wearing.
She sent the text about the not to adorn yourself with like pearls and, to be modest, which was like, yeah, like you said, it's in regards to wealth.
Yeah.
Not anything else.
It's bull how the witnesses apply that, because they're well, at the same time, some of them apply it properly. At the hall I went to in Pennsylvania, sisters and brothers got in trouble for wearing brightly colored socks and stockings, because at the time, like the 60s type of stockings were in style, where they're super bright and kind of like garish.
Yeah, I have a bunch of those.
Yeah, and so that would be a proper application of that scripture. But saying like you have to wear stockings would be a misapplication of it, because that hall said both things.
I don't
It
even know
said-
if I necessarily agree that like brightly colored stockings would be going with that
These were
scripture.
distracting because they weren't just brightly colored. They had like polka dots on them, like big dots. Like the socks too would have like sharks and stuff.
My
like,
quirky self is like, there's nothing, that's not immodest. Like, that's loud, but it's not immodest.
it is on the backdrop of Western Pennsylvania,
Yeah, well,
Amish country.
California here, so like,
But like
anything
even
like-
then, that if you're gonna criticize that would be a proper application of that scripture, which I think is still dumb. But you know, that would be
Yeah.
a proper application. What isn't is like you said, it has nothing to do with what parts of your body you expose. I mean, obviously, we can all agree that yeah, if I walked around like with genitalia just showing everywhere, that's immodest. But like that's not what we're talking about. Like
And you know, she was like, you can wear it with a tank top underneath.
oh,
and
she
you can
gave
wear
you
a
suggestions. How
jacket."
sweet.
And I was like, who cares? Like, why do you care?
That sounds like sweaty options.
Like, what difference does it make to you what I wear? Like, if you don't want to wear that, that's fine. You don't have to.
The
That's-
fact that
that's-
she gave you recommendations. That's so
She was
weird.
like, you can wear it with a cute little jacket, and you know, I was like, it's fucking summer in Florida. Do you think I want to wear a fucking
You're
jacket?
in Florida.
Yeah, when you mentioned that you had like a whole drawer of undergarment, like undershirts, I related to that like you wouldn't believe. I had so many, and I got rid of them after I woke up. I was like, forget this. I'm not wearing tank tops underneath my blouses and dresses anymore because they never look good and they're never comfortable. They're always riding up. There's always
Yep.
that's an extra layer of
They-
sweatiness in the summertime.
And they always leave that like wrinkly look to your shirts because you
Yeah.
have like so many layers bunching up. Oh my god. I had one in
Horrible.
every fucking color and I
I know.
Dude, you guys
I found one in like a unique color. I'm like, oh my god, I've never seen neon
Yeah.
green before, and like be so excited because maybe I could wear it with something else. But, yeah,
guys ever-
I agree. It was just so stupid.
do you guys ever tuck your tank top into your stockings to make it stay down?
Yeah,
Okay.
100%.
And then it would like get real sweaty and gross.
Oh my god, yeah.
every
Yeah.
time.
I knew a family who, if you were giving a part on stage, you like they were from the East Coast. Remember, I was in California at the time, so like their mentality was like
looser.
way stricter. They were so strict, but they were like, yeah, you have to like wear stockings when you're on the
Yeah.
stage. Like it didn't matter if it was in the middle of summertime, you had to wear them on the stage.
Yep.
And when I visited Bethel for the first time, I went with them. Thankfully, it was October, so like wearing stockings was normal. But like, I remember some girls from LA who like we happened to like meet up. You know, we just met in passing, and they were not wearing stockings while visiting Bethel,
Shameful.
and they just talked shit about them because they were like, they weren't even wearing stockings. They're just here to find brothers. Like this whole thing, and I'm like, I don't want to wear stockings either.
I know, it's so dumb. It was so shocking to me when because I moved to Pennsylvania when I was 16, and I went to one of my first meetings, and one of the sisters was like, oh, you look so beautiful, but you should be wearing stockings. And where's your slip? And I was like, I'm wearing a slip, first of all.
Backhanded
You
compliment.
cannot see under my skirt. Second of all, I'm wearing a thong, so that way my underlines don't show through. So don't underwear lines. So don't like act like there's like you can see anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Third of all, it's none of your business if I wear stockings. It's none of your business. It's literally 102 degrees. It's
Don't-
August in Pennsylvania. Back
Don't
off.
don't you love those compliments though, where it's like, oh, you look really great, but sister, you're looking like a hussy. Like, I
Well,
can tell
you really
wearing
look-
thick
you-
pants under there, and I don't like it.
You really look like the whore of Babylon in the illustration, which is great for you. But
she
wouldn't she
was
look better
so
if she had a head
pretty.
covering?
She was
Yeah.
so pretty.
She's
Her
so pretty.
dresses
Yeah.
immaculate. I want one for my
Goblet.
closet.
She's not a goblet.
But wouldn't she look better if her head was covered? And, you know, her shoulders were covered.
She had
That
stockings
would-
on.
I think that would show her true beauty, you know?
Doesn't she wear a crown?
I don't remember.
Because I think that's a head covering.
Technically head covering? Wow.
Here's the thing, though. We know the Watchtower standard of beauty because they drew it. They were like, the whore of Babylon has to be gorgeous.
This is
they
the hottest
drew
thing we can
idea-
imagine.
This is the hottest thing. Yep, neckline up to here, but there it is.
There it is. Not even the horror of Babylon can have cleavage because we
No.
don't want to put that in our publications and stumble somebody.
Nope.
Now, I wanted to ask, like, how is this all contributing to your like self-image? Because this constant scrutiny from every aspect of the organization, from men to well-meaning sisters, and all of that, to the publications and the videos and everything. How do you feel about yourself as a witness?
So this is actually something I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of guilt associated with it. Like, you feel guilty, and then you're also told on top of that, like, if you stumble someone, if you make someone, like, think an improper thought or whatever, you're guilty for their blood at Armageddon if they die. That's what I was told, at least. I don't know if ever anyone else had the experience. I was told, like, if you cause someone to stumble by wearing something or by saying or doing something inappropriate, you are blood guilty for their death. So that led me to, like, second guess, like, everything I wore, and second guess, like, oh my goodness, is my cleavage showing? Is my skirt too tight? And it led me to, like, hate a lot of parts of myself that I had no control over. Obviously, like, after deconstructing, I've come out and kind of, like, embraced that, because I think it's beautiful to be able to embrace that now, and to, like, be able to make the choice myself to say, no, I want to wear this because I look good.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I felt, like, so, like, vindictive and hateful towards myself because of all that stuff that I was told. And then on top of that, feeling guilty, like, oh, if I wear this, I might cause so-and-so to stumble and cause them to die at Armageddon. So it also led to a lot of, like, fear for, okay, is what I'm doing going to cause someone to die?
I wanted to just say, like, real quick, like, even if you are, like, if people think that sounds extreme, like, well, the whole, even if you didn't hear that specifically as a witness, like, the whole danger of stumbling someone is that they stumble out of the faith. So even if you weren't specifically told, like, oh, you could, stumble somebody and then they'll die at Armageddon and you're blood guilt for your lack of modesty, like, that is what they're saying, because everything has the consequence of, and they might die at Armageddon, and it could kind of be your fault a little bit. Sorry, Jenny, I feel like I trampled you there.
No, I was just kind of going along with what Cam said, is you learn to hate yourself and to be so uncomfortable in your own skin. And, even now that I'm awake and I'm undoing that sort of indoctrination, it's still a struggle to look in the mirror and think, oh, I'm pretty, or I look nice, or I feel good about my body, because you weren't really allowed to feel like that. And what happens is you internalize that so much, and then you start passing judgment on others that you do find beautiful. Like, there were always sisters who I was like, I hate her. Like, she's pretty and she looks good and she seems like she's comfortable in her own skin. Like, you just would kind of get this sort of judgment about them and vindictive. And, like, it was very much like a mean girl type of attitude where you felt ugly and frumpy. And so you took it out on the girls who weren't portraying what you thought that they should look like. You were like, look, how come you're wearing spaghetti straps and not a frumpy sweater like I am?
And no
like,
one's commenting on what you look like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's fawning over how pretty you are. And, like, I'm getting in trouble because you can see my kneecaps. You know what I mean? Like, there's this sense of, like, you just become jealous. And I think that's a huge issue for women in purity culture, in these types of organizations, is that you learn to hate yourself and to then hate other women. And it's a very scary thing, and it's very difficult to undo. And I think it has an effect on lots of areas of life, or maybe you have a harder time respecting other women because you were taught not even to respect yourself. So that's something that you have to work so hard to overcome.
Yeah, there's a lot of internalized misogyny and kind of like a pick-me attitude among a lot of witnesses. And I'm sure it doesn't just extend to women. I'm sure it's also an issue with men. But I don't know. And here's the thing. I always had a complicated relationship when it came to women, because I am bisexual and would like develop crushes on women and then like hate them because I felt like it's kind of like an incest thing. Not incest. Oh my god, incel. Not incest. Incel. It's like an
I was
incel
like,
thing.
is that
Like I
Wait.
hated them because I was attracted to them and it made me feel really shitty. Both because I was like I'm comparing myself to them, but also because I was attracted to them and that made me feel really gross. And but like with the appearance thing, the hard thing for me is I'm an identical triplet, and going to like outside of just like the inappropriate comments people make to triplets, you would be shocked at the things people think they can get away with saying to you. But you know, every meeting it was always a game. It was always a game. People would line us up and they'd pick or they'd play like who's who, but the way they would do it was to point out your physical, you know, like your physical differences. And so what they would do is they'd line you up and they'd say, oh, well, you know, that one, her teeth are a little more crooked and her hair is just a little bit frizzier. And, you know, if you look at that one, she's got like freckles on her face. And they thought it would not do any damage, I guess. And that's like outside of the comments, like, you know, like worldly people were the worst sometimes. Like old creepy worldly men would not even old, like some of them were young, would say things like, oh, do you do porn because we're identical triplets, which is weird. I was like, I don't know, would you do your brother? Like, are you into incest? Okay, that's weird on you. And you know, people would just get like, so it's hard for me personally to connect it to witness stuff because as a triplet, like people were just constantly commenting on our appearance. And so I don't think I really got the whole scope of that. We had to keep up appearances because we were noticeable, because like if you see 3 people that look exactly the same walking towards you, you're not going to just be like, oh, that's weird, and walk away. And unless you're nice. And so I actually kind of got to miss out on the witness purity culture aspect of it, and instead got the like novelty version where people are treating you like you're not a person at all, and like it goes past objectifying and you're actually just a toy, and not one that people want to own, one that people want to play with. And like it's like really weird, and yeah, it's not easily describable. So I'm actually, I don't know if I'm lucky or if that makes me unlucky, but
I think you just experienced it differently, and it still scars you. It still shapes
the
how you
problem
view
is
yourself.
it's not like that I view myself as ugly as much as like I view all my traits very distinctly as existing, and basically anything that's noticeable gives me anxiety. Like if something makes me stand out, I want to do something to make it less stand outy. Sure, I want to make it stand out less. So like if my hair looks particularly good one day, I feel self-conscious about it. If like I look nice, like if I dress really nice, and I'm not talking like sexually or immodestly, if I'm dressed nice, I like will get sick to my stomach. Like I'll actually like start crying or hyperventilating because I feel like I'm gonna, like someone's gonna point it out or like pick it apart. And yeah, and I don't know if that's a unique experience or if like other people feel that way, where like you feel like if you dress nice, people are gonna pick you apart. They're gonna be like, wow, you look so nice, and also this and this and this and this and this and this, and that's like,
I can honestly relate to that. Again, I had an experience. I was about 13, I think. I was playing violin at the time. It was just something that I really wanted to do, and my cousin played piano. And I had it in my head, okay, we're going to get together one morning, and I was going to go over to her house, and we were going to duet, and I was going to play violin, and she was going to play piano. We were going to be so good. It was going to be awesome. And so I wanted to dress. I wanted to dress all professional, right? And so I go into my little 13-year-old girl wardrobe saying, what do I have that looks professional? So I find a black tank top. I found like a plaid mini skirt that had belonged to my sister that I borrowed. I was like, okay, I think this is professional. And then I had like some little black heels that I put on. And then I found some of my mom's like, you know, dark red lipstick and put that on. And I put a little scarf around my neck, and I had my violin case. And I'm like, oh my God, I look so professional.
You're like, I look French.
I look so good. And so my mom drops me off at my aunt's house. Again, this is my JW aunt. And she takes one look at me. She goes, if we go anywhere, I'm taking you home to change first. And it just, again, just took the air out of my sails. I didn't understand why. She goes, that skirt is way too short for you. Like, I don't know. Why are you wearing lipstick?
How
Like,
old were you?
13. Yeah. So I can relate to what you're saying about you when you feel like you're dressed up and you're looking good. I still do that. I have a closet full of really nice clothes that I just adore when I'm wearing at home, but I feel so self-conscious when I walk out the door and I'm like, people are going to look at me and think that I'm trying too hard. They're going to look and be like, you don't look as good as you think you look, honey. Like, there's all those, there's all those thoughts in my head that I'm like, and then you just get really uncomfortable and you start sweating and you can't be comfortable in these cute clothes. So you just go back to like wearing your jeans and whatever. And that's something that I have to actively, I'm in my 30s now. I have to actively work on feeling okay wearing something out of the norm, because you're taught your whole life to conform and fit into this little pencil skirt and sweater mentality. And then when you want to break outside of that, all of those negative thoughts that you were instilled in growing up come flooding to the surface. So you're like, outwardly you look great, but inside you just feel like a piece of garbage and you wish you didn't.
Yeah. Do men feel this way, Jake? Do men have this issue?
I think they can. Yeah.
Is it like a common thing?
I wanted to just remark, sorry that I had to step away a couple times. The cats were being horrible, and so I let them in because they were crying, and then immediately I had to kick them right back out because they started destroying things immediately. Yes. I mean, to some degree, yes. I mean, it's not quite the same. I think what you get a lot of with men is like, well, internalized homophobia or biphobia or whatever, or like externalized, obviously, because you're kind of constantly analyzing everything. Like, is that gay? Is that too gay? Is this what I'm wearing? Showing off my body in some way, because that's shameful. I should wear the baggiest suit ever. Like my suit pants are basically just like parachute pants. So that's kind of what that's the version of it that I have, where like now I'm like, I'm consciously not doing a great job today, but I'm consciously trying to be like, I need to get more colorful clothes, because even just like there were certain circuit overseers who were like, if you are on the stage and you're not wearing a white shirt, then this is an affront to God. So
God
like,
hates purple.
He hates purple so much.
No.
By the way.
Yep.
Jenny, he hates your background right now. I don't know how to tell you this, but God hates what you're doing right now. He doesn't like any of what's happening on this, video, probably.
Yeah,
but
probably. Wait, did you guys actually talk about boys?
We
Yes.
did.
Oh my God,
Yep.
I did not. I had no friends
Yeah.
that I talked to about boys with, partially because I didn't know many, and also partially because I felt like I was going to get in trouble because of the way my mom talked about sisters who were boy crazy.
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we were going to talk about marriage and sex, but yeah, let's talk about boy crazy teenagers.
I mean, this is like the same thing.
Because
I think we all went through that phase when we were 13. We started really dreaming about like your first kiss, and maybe it was like all those Disney, Channel original movies where it's like something amazing happens when you're 13 and then you get your first kiss. Like, I wanted that so much, and then I was guilted into feeling like that was bad because you shouldn't kiss anybody until you're engaged.
I passed over that. So I was so against, because of how my mom would talk about people who, like teenagers who were into boys, and I knew my mom was self-described as boy crazy when she was a teenager. I so badly did not want to be that. So I suppressed myself so much that if I even had a thought of like kissing a boy, I would suppress it. Here's the issue with that. I went straight from like what would be normal, healthy thoughts about sex and boys to just kink. Like, just the whole, like, just one day was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, it was never like, it was 0 to 100 and I missed 90 chapters because I was so scared to be in a relationship with somebody or to fall for someone and then end up being like, well, I'm 16. There's nothing I can do about it. And so I just like suppress.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty common. I mean, I had those desires when I was younger, but then as I started to understand that those weren't okay, you do start to tamp those down, you put them away in a locked box, you don't think about them, and it's Well, I
And
found
then your
it
dreams
difficult.
get weird.
Well, no, I found it difficult for myself because I hadn't done anything. Like I was a good little JW girl. And so I just kept all those dirty little thoughts bottled away, dead in there for your body members. Like I took that seriously. And so suddenly I was married. And now I have to do the things that I told myself were bad and wrong all the time. So you go from zero to having to like jump into this whole part of your life and you're like, I don't know how. I don't know how to do the sex. I don't know how to be sexy. I don't, and like, so I really struggled with it because I needed all this time to try to gear up and get
And you
myself
didn't have
mentally
any.
prepared to do this action. And, my spouse, not his fault, but he just didn't get it.
Was
We
it
just
your first
weren't,
kiss?
yeah,
I'm sorry. Mine too.
yeah. And
I love
so
my spouse, but like, God.
it was, and again, this isn't disparaging to him at all. I just don't think that we were really the right fit for each other. But you can't know that until after you get married. And you're not going to know if you like sex or you like marriage until it's too late and you're already in it. So that happens and you're like, okay, this is my life now. I spent my whole life never allowing myself to think about sex, never allowing myself to feel anything. And now I have to try to unclog that drain that I've been stopping up forever and get into it and be excited about it and want to. And you just find yourself like, you just don't know how to mentally prepare for
Pretending.
that.
You just pretend.
You just pretend. It's like suddenly it's like being thrown into a dark room and you have to find the light switch and you've never been in this room before. And it could be dangling from the ceiling. It could be on the wall opposite. You don't know where the light is and you're just expected to figure it out. And so
But worse than that, you're in the dark, but there's people watching you and they're watching you and you're supposed to look like you know where the light switch is. So you're walking around confidently like, I know where it is. Yep.
Yeah.
I know where the light switch is.
You're playing pretend. Like I was playing
Yeah,
pretend.
it's
Like, oh, look at
horrible.
me, I'm so sexy. But like when it came to it, I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And like it was
In your brain, you're like, this doesn't
frustrating.
feel good. This feels
And
kind of
that-
bad.
Like, and I was fortunate in that like I had a subscription at 17 magazine as a teenager, and I knew I knew the basics. But when it actually came time to like enact that stuff, I was suddenly just like, I don't know what to do. Like I feel nothing. I don't feel anything. It's normal. Am I broken?
It's not
Am
that
I
you
broken? I
don't...
feel broken.
That's a perfect way to describe it, because it's not that you don't know what you're doing. It's that you don't feel anything because of the circumstances surrounding it. And so you are just kind of confused. And you're not confused because it's not like you don't know what to do. Like, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't as bad about sexual education as other religions.
You put the thing in the thing and, works.
Not just that. Like, parents are pretty good about, like, talking to their kids. And if they're not, they probably let their kids learn about it in school. Or kids find a way, right?
Yes.
But nobody really prepares you for what happens when you don't feel anything
Right. When
emotionally.
you are unable to connect emotionally,
And
and
there's
you're
no
just
advice
sort of
for
there.
that outside of pray or study together. And that's bullshit. That's gross. I don't
Or
want
just
Jehovah in my
build in your
sex.
head like you do at meetings.
It's just terrible.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because your spouse hasn't necessarily done anything wrong.
No.
And so you're trying to like work with them, but you have different needs, you have different desires and different views on things, and you're trying to make that work in this situation where you didn't have a chance to figure out if you were going to work together before you got married and you made this unbreakable vow. And so then you come across issues with struggling with consent and coercion. And it's not ever necessarily that like you're forced to do something, but you have this biblical mindset that like, well, this is your duty as a wife or as a spouse.
The
You have to
marital
do this.
due.
The marital due. You have.
I
this is
actually-
something that you
Sorry,
have to
that-
do.
No, you're
That
right.
phrase just triggers
I
me.
actually kind of
Yeah.
disagree. Coercion is extremely common.
That's sorry if I wasn't
Like,
clear. I'm
no.
saying like you encounter that where you're feeling coerced.
The problem is like it's not just you're feeling coerced. Like the way the religion is set up, the husband tends to feel like it's his duty to coerce his wife into having sex, which is sad. And what's bad about that is then when the wife is like, wait a second, this is like kind of rapey, husbands might not be too keen to agree because they're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Or if they do, like they recognize that this is not something you want to do, then they feel ashamed or they feel guilt or
Yes.
they feel upset. So what I encountered was a bit of an unintended silent treatment where it's like, well, now he feels like he's not desirable. Now he feels like he's being rejected. And so that makes me feel guilty. So then in turn, I feel like I have to just do it anyway because I don't want him to feel bad. So like, no matter what happens,
but that is coercive still.
It is. And it's a whole setup where like, you know, even if the other person isn't necessarily trying to force you into something, their behavior or the way that, you know, everything is coming together just is in this, it's just a mess. It's a mess. And you don't get to truly experience like passion or love that way.
Well, and unfortunately, unless something really bad happens that kind of wakes them up to how like weird their sex life is, they're going to continue like that. And, you know, it's not always like the woman in that being coerced position either. I know a couple who were witnesses. He still is. She's not. He grew up in a very, 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 very strict Spanish household that did not talk about sex at all. And he has a very hard time with sex. He thinks it's gross because of how he was raised. Like, it's disgusting to him. And she was not that way at all. She probably has the highest sex drive I've ever seen in another woman. And they're divorced. Like, she left because she was basically like coercing him or manipulating him into having sex with her because she wanted sex every day. And like, he didn't want sex at all. And like, you know, the fact that they're stuck, that they can't undo that relationship in a friendly way where they could even remain friends, the fact that it has to be like she leaves the truth and gets disfellowshipped by sleeping with other people so that way he can be free, that's gross. That's sad. It shouldn't have to be that way. They should be able to amicably be like, this isn't working, clearly. Even though we love each other, we can move on and, you know, go our separate ways.
That's the issue with that purity culture is you don't get a chance to figure that out before you get married. Like she could have, you know, had that experience where she knows she needs a lot
she had no idea.
Yeah, and to go for that, and he, you know, should get a chance to realize maybe he's asexual. Maybe he's just so disinterested in sex that he wants a romantic relationship, but not a sexual relationship. And if you don't know those things about yourself because you get married young or you get married without doing any self-exploration, you end up in a relationship where it's like, yeah, I care about this person, but we don't fit.
Yeah, and it's sad because like it goes from I care about this person and we don't fit to a potentially abusive situation, which they were in and I've been in. Like it's really sad how dark it can turn and without people realizing it. It's just dark and you blame yourself because clearly you're not praying enough and you're not involving Jehovah enough into the relationship, and that's why it's dark. Not because of the circumstances, but because you didn't involve Jehovah enough. And that's
because Jehovah wants to make your marriage a threesome.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, the real throuple. And that's how, you know, that's why those relationships don't get better. And that's why they continue to produce articles about like being submissive and being a responsible head. And it's like, if you just took all that away, you know, first of all, I don't know about, so this is a unique experience. I like when I woke up, my husband and I have a great relationship now, but like before that it was bad. It was really, really, really bad. It was really stressful all the time, and not just surrounding sex. Like everything was really stressful. And as soon as I woke up, it was like, now we have a relationship 8 years in, and now we have a relationship. And all it took was me being like, this isn't the truth. And once I took Jehovah out of the equation, our relationship, our marriage was fine. And it shouldn't take that. The fact that what witnesses believe is the glue to their relationship is actually the biggest hindrance. That's really sad.
Because you aren't able to actually be open about the things that you need, or about maybe those particular kinks that you do have, or those things that you're kind of afraid to talk about because you don't want them to add more shame and more guilt to your own personal thoughts and desires, because you've already had that your entire life. So now you have this person who you're supposed to be able to share everything with,
and you can't.
And you're keeping secrets. You're hiding away little parts of yourself because you just don't know if they're going to accept that, because you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to hurt yourself, you don't want to feel
Mhm.
guilty, you don't want to feel shame, and it's so damaging to your psyche, and it's damaging to them too. I mean, we talk about, coercion in abusive relationships, and while men have certain they have to own up to some of those things as well. They are raised in this environment that produces them to be like that, and they're being maybe abusive or coercive in ways that they don't even realize that they are. Like I would say, for my ex, he was a very loving person. He was very caring, and I don't think that he ever had a thought in his mind to potentially hurt me or do any type of harm. But just the way that dynamic worked, and involving just the way that we both grew up with these sort of thoughts, and the way that I worked and the way that he worked, and it didn't fit together, it created an environment where I'm loath to use the word abusive, but
No,
it created an environment that was difficult for me to want to be intimate, because it wasn't working, and it wasn't anybody's fault. That's just how it was.
You know what though? It's important to normalize the word abusive, because it gets rid of the stigma of men not being able to own up to being abusive, right? So something my husband talks about a lot is his abusive tendencies and how he has had to overcome it. And the reason he talks about it is because men will not come forward if they feel like they're going to be ostracized for admitting or for owning up to the harm that they've caused. I think it's important to recognize that just because your spouse may not have intended that their intentions were not abusive doesn't make their actions, like, it doesn't absolve their actions as being non-abusive.
Right.
Their actions can be abusive whether or not they intended to be or not. I know for a fact
that's one of those things that I'm still grappling with, because I would hate for him to have that view of himself, but I feel like if I don't think he would look at anything and think, oh, that's abusive. But I can look at our relationship and be like, well, this wasn't quite right, and this wasn't quite right, and this was kind of damaging to me in certain regards. But I would hate for him to reflect on that and then realize, I don't know, it's very difficult.
It's hard, and it's hard because a lot of abuse in the organization is gray. It's not black and white. It's gray because you're looking at it through the Watchtower lens, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at it through like biblical times, which do not apply to modern standards, right? And so when you're like, well, my husband just wants sex all the time, but that's my duty, and if he wants it, we need to meet half and half some way. That's not normal. That's not okay, and you shouldn't have to put up with that. But for witnesses, they really do have to.
And again, I think that's part of purity culture, is that, your sex is so much more than just what you're doing physically.
Yes.
And not to be like, oh, one night stands, oh, they're wrong. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, you need to be connected, and you need to be present for those acts. And when you're just there for them because you feel like you're obligated to be there for them, that's not a connection, and that's not building a relationship at all.
No, and it's hard to advocate for yourself, and also like kind of like wake them up to like, hey, our sex life is bad, and not just because we're incompatible, but because of this, this, and this. And it took me literally accusing my husband of rape. Trigger warning. It literally took me accusing him of rape for him to be like, oh shit, and like for us to like actually have that conversation. And it literally it takes so freaking much to get people to pay attention to what you're saying when it comes to your sex life in the organization. And it shouldn't have to. You should be able to be taken at face value about the things you say, but unfortunately, because of the nature of how we're raised, you don't. Nobody takes you at face value. They take you as like, well, they're also a sinner, and so some of the things they say might be influenced by Satan, blah blah blah.
Try harder. You're just not trying hard enough to connect.
And that's the crazy thing, and that's why a lot of women don't even realize they're in abusive situations, is because they're blamed for not trying hard enough. It's all on them. Anything wrong with the sex life is on them.
And that's certainly how I felt. I felt like I was the one that was broken. I was like, what's wrong with me that I can't get into this? I just don't feel connected. I just don't, I don't want to do, it's a chore. It's just another wifely chore. I had to clean the toilet, and I had to make dinner, and I had to scrub the floors, and I had to do the sex.
Yeah, and it's so embarrassing once you wake up and you're like, how am I so dumb? And you're not dumb, but like,
Yeah,
you know, you feel that way.
So much better if I could have just been honest and open, and we could have worked together on it without the elders being involved.
Yes. Ugh.
Because so when we were
The
first
elders being involved in your sex life.
oh yeah, well, when we were first dating, and this is gonna sound funny because I was a total virgin and clueless, like we got a little hands-on with stuff, right?
As every couple does, and then admits 5
nothing
years into their
bad, nothing
relationship.
that we
It's
could have
fine.
gotten disfellowshipped for, but just enough that like he felt really guilty. And I was 25. We were married. I'm like, who cares? Like, right? It's over. We're done. We did what was right in Jehovah's eyes. We're married. Who cares? But he still felt a lot of guilt and wanted to go to the elders.
I did the same thing.
And I was new in the congregation. I had moved to, I had been living in California. I moved to Idaho to marry him. And so I didn't know these guys very well. And so we sat in the judicial committee talking about these intimate things. And again, these are my first sexual experiences that I'm now discussing with 3 men that I didn't know very well. And I just, like, that numbed me up so much. Like, he was so relieved. He felt like, oh, finally now we can like do things and I don't feel guilty about it anymore. I just sat there, I'm like, I don't want to do anything ever again. Like, I feel so humiliated that like I'm an adult woman and we didn't even have sex. There was not even close.
Yeah.
It was just a little bit of touching here and there, and like I had to go confront, and I was afraid that we were going to get disfellowshipped and like everyone was going to like know my shame, and I'd have this scarlet letter on me for the rest of my life, because you never scrub that off. Even when you're reinstated, you're always, oh, she got disfellowshipped so long ago.
Especially as a woman.
You don't recover from that.
No way to publicly.
It's so invasive, because I mean, obviously I wasn't married, but at one point I was, I had told like a friend who had, by the way, told me like a lot of explicit things that her and her boyfriend were doing, in school.
Oh, fun.
And I didn't say anything about that. But the moment I told her I kissed a boy, she was like, oh, I have to go to the elders with this. So she told the elders.
Bitch.
And I was like, I did not tell her. I did not tell the elders that you had a boy in your bed when your parents were at home. I did not tell the elders that, you were sneaking off in school to do things. I did not say a word.
And she's like, she kissed a boy.
She kissed a boy. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And I remember
what a friend.
having to sit there and explain to the elders. And they were asking me all these questions like, did he touch you? Did he like? And these are people who had seen me grow up. Like, they had seen me from when I was like 8 or 9 grow up until like, an 18, 19-year-old. So I was like, I don't want to talk to you about this. Like, it's none of your business.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, well, I remember it's just so intrusive.
Feeling like, oh man, why do you care? Like, and I think at the time I was actually 17, so I wasn't even an adult at that time.
But you're not a kid either, and they're worried about you kissing a boy at 17. It's not like you're 13.
It makes you feel so dirty about something so normal, and you then get this sort of idea that now you're tainted, that you're not fit. And that was something I was always scared about.
Shame on you, Kim.
No man will ever love me because like I've been touched already. And it's just
well, because you have to view about other people. It's like if you knew someone who is your age and they've been messing around with someone of the opposite sex, like you never forgot that. You were like in your 30s and you're like, this person is now married and an elder, and you're like, do you remember that time he was like sneaking around with so and so? Like, that's always there. Like, it is such a bad thing, and it's such a marker. It's so ridiculous. But you have this again, purity. It's about being pure and about never having been touched, because once you cross that line, you can't go back, and that sticks with you for the rest of your life.
I wanted to ask Cam about, you're someone who left before you got roped into marriage in the organization.
Yay,
no,
you escaped.
And what was that like though? Because you still, lost a lot of formative years being in the group, and then you leave at 18. So what was your experience kind of having to acclimate yourself to, I don't know, the real world?
And that's a really terrifying age to leave, by the way.
Yeah. It was not fun. So I actually had like 2 years where essentially my parents had given me an ultimatum. They were like, either you can own up to whatever sins you committed and we can let you stay here until you like can leave. So I had to own up to the elders, or I had to leave. They were like, you either own up to the elders and admit all of the wrong things that you've done and, be the consequences what they may.
How old were you?
19.
Okay.
19. I was
I
19.
thought you meant
at the
like
time.
they told you to leave at 17, and I was gonna be like,
No. At 19, they were like, either you tell the elders like everything you've done and, suffer the consequences, or you can continue living whatever life you're living and leave. So I took the route of like, I don't have a job. I don't have any income. I have nothing. So I was like, I will tell the elders what I did. And instead of telling them what I did, I actually just disassociated myself. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
you're such a Jane Austen character.
Admitted nothing. And they were like, they were trying, I think they were kind of shocked because they came for a shepherding visit. And I told them, like, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. Just point
cut and
blank.
dry.
Cut dry. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, I don't like the way that Jehovah's
Wow.
Witnesses treat the LGBT community. I don't like the way that women are treated in this organization. And
Yeah.
they were trying to like point all things that oh, but no, we don't treat gay people badly. We just want them to change everything about themselves. So I just like, I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. And they were like, oh, well, you have to write a letter. I was like, all right. The letter I think was
They
like,
made you write a letter. When was this?
I was 19. It was
No, like what year?
2015.
Oh, you're a baby.
I'm a baby. Yeah.
Also a baby. I was also 19. I was 19 in 2014.
Yeah.
So
And-
You're a
yeah.
baby too.
I know. I married an older man.
And
I refuse to do math. I won't do it.
and when I said this, like, again, I didn't want to admit to anything because I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong at that point. Like, up until then, like, yes, I had dated a few boys, but I hadn't like done anything objectively bad, so I didn't feel like there was anything for me to own up to. So I was like, look, I don't want to go through the process of doing a judicial committee, and I don't want to rehash like any sexual experiences with old men that saw me grow up. So I
Gee,
just-
why?
That's a really good.
So good afterwards.
Yeah.
That
Don't you feel
dynamic is really
refreshed?
important that you brought up, though, is like the fact that you are not just like confessing behind a panel and there's some anonymity to it. It's like these people really well, and in some cases, if it's your home congregation that you've grown up in, like they knew you when you were a kid. Maybe you knew them when they were a kid. If it's like some guy you grew up with who then got appointed as an elder or something. So there's a real like strange. Obviously, there's a power imbalance, but it's just like socially, it's very, very uncomfortable.
That confidentiality isn't there either, Cam. Like you are talking to these guys, and if you tell them anything, it's not going to stay between the four of you. It's going to get to their wives and their kids, and everyone in the congregation is going to know that you're a hussy, even though like you didn't do anything to deserve that title. That's a frustrating thing. Is there is zero confidentiality when it comes to being a woman and talking to the elders. They'll tell your dad, they'll tell your husband. It doesn't matter what it is. They'll just blab about it, but they'll afford that to like pedophiles and other people in the congregation they respect who are men. They'll be like, oh yeah, we won't tell anybody about this, and they'll they'll keep that word. But when you're a woman,
dude, there is literally I know 3 pedophiles that went to my congregation who I didn't know they were pedophiles until this year.
Yeah. This brings up something that like the gossip culture in the JWs is like so prevalent. And this kind of goes back, actually ties into like the talk we were having about consent. And this is someone else's story, so I'm not going to say any names just because I want to keep their whole thing mostly private.
Totally fair.
But
But use it
I
as an
remember,
example.
and this was a story that enraged me so much that I had to go home from a party after I heard it because I was so upset. I remember I was sitting, like, we were at like a congregation picnic, and I was sitting with this person from the congregation, and she was telling me a story about like someone who had recently moved to like another congregation somewhere else. She had mentioned that, oh, like this girl, she's disfellowshipped now. And I was like, oh, why? What happened? You know, because, you know, I was just maybe a little bit curious. Like, you know, I was like, what happened? Because, you know, they were friends. And she was like, oh, well, you know, she went out with a boy to dinner, and the boy put something in her drink, took her home, sexually assaulted her. She ended up pregnant after this.
Did she get disfellowshipped?
And she got disfellowshipped.
Sounds about right.
I have comments on that.
And
Because-
everyone knew after this. And this poor girl was disfellowshipped
For being
completely
roofied.
alone with her rapist child. And it just enraged me so much I had to go home. I was so upset.
Dude, that would have thoroughly kicked me out of the organization because I've been roofied. I was roofied at a concert, and I woke up at home. So, like, I'm at the concert. I looked down and I was like, man, there's a lot of blonde people here. And then I woke up at home. I was in my onesie and I just, like, sat up and I was like, what time is it? What happened? I wasn't hungover, nothing, no side effects. I just, like, woke up. And that was weird for me because if I drank too much and blacked out, I would be hungover. None of that. You have no control over your body when you're roofied.
No.
In fact, you probably won't remember anything at all. And so the fact that she was disfellowshipped for something that was not only just like entirely out of her control, but also something because witnesses don't believe in abortion, she suffered from.
Yeah. And
So
was shunned.
particularly, yes,
At the lowest point
shunned.
in your life, when you probably just want to die, and now your entire support system is gone, and you're blamed for something you had no control over. And they're probably like, well, you shouldn't have
Literally.
put yourself in that situation. You shouldn't have been on a
That's-
date with them without a chaperone.
that's
what
exactly
they'll
what
say.
they said.
But here's what I would
Yeah.
say to that, because when I got roofied, I was at a concert with a female friend, and I got roofied by the bartender. I had a beer, and he put a roofie in my beer. Like, I wasn't on a date. You don't need to be on a date to get roofied. The fact that, like, they're using those circumstances against her when she could have been roofied, like, at a concert. She could have been roofied in literally any other circumstance for no reason or, rhyme or reason at all is
And
really gross. That's sad.
And
is
of
she
course
still in the
she was-
organization?
I don't know.
I hope not.
I lost touch with this particular person, and then this was like a little bit kind of before I was just. This was actually one of the things that, like, I was like at my breaking point at this point. Like the straws were getting piled on the camel's back, and I was like, it's gonna break at some point. And I remember like sitting there like kind of shocked, kind of like a little shell shocked when she told me this. I was like, but wait. And I even said like, but it wasn't her fault. I was like, why was she, you know, disfellowshipped if it wasn't her fault? And the girl, you know, that was telling me this, was like, oh, well, you know, she went on the date with the guy and he was worldly. So like, what did she expect? And it's like,
To
respect,
not be roofied.
trust, to not be fucking roofied.
Because being worldly does not make you somebody who's gonna roofie someone. Like in
Like,
the same sense that being a Bethelite doesn't mean you're not gonna rape somebody.
And I
That
have
puts
been
you- Oh,
on.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say I've been on plenty of dates with guys. They have never roofied me. I've been to bars and clubs, and I have never been roofied. And it could be like, you know, I'm keeping track of my drink, and you know but like if I'm going on a date with someone, I at least hope that they have like the respect to not do that. You know.
Yeah. But that puts you in the mindset of elders, because I had this conversation. So my friends who kicked me out of the group, they had come to chat with me about my doubts, and one of them was an elder. And we were talking about certain Bible verses that I had taken issue with. And I mentioned, about, women being stoned to death for having been raped. And he was like, well, no, like if they screamed out, they wouldn't have been stoned. And I was like, there was a lot of problems with that. I'm like, okay, what if this person, like maybe she is in the city and she, he's got a knife to her throat and he's threatening her, or I'm like, sometimes when you're in a situation where you just freeze and you're not there, like you're floating above your body and you're not even thinking about what's going on. And then we transitioned to the whole thing about like, okay, somebody was in the field and he was like, what was she even doing in the field? Like, why would she even be out there? And I'm
Why
like,
can't she be out there?
I was like, are you hearing yourself? Like, you're blaming her for like going for a walk in a field, and so a man approaches her, and like, so now she needs to be married to her rapist. Like, that's her fault, so she should just get married to him. But that gives you the idea that gives you some insight into the brain of these guys who are in charge of these rules, who are imposing this sort of culture on the people in the congregation that like, you're the woman, you're always to blame. It's always your fault. You should have known not to go on a date. You should have known you needed a chaperone. You should have known you shouldn't go walking by yourself. You asked for it.
Yes, and here's what's super, 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 like, pissy about that is that the fact that the human brain will always do everything in its power to rationalize what's happening. And so most people, when they're being raped, do not think they're being raped right away. Like, they rationalize it away. They rationalize it as, this isn't actually happening. This isn't happening to me. And they disassociate. Like, it's human nature to do that. It is not human nature to, if you're being raped, yell. That is not human nature at all. Your nature is going to tell you to rationalize what is happening to you, because that is how the human brain compensates for trauma. If you're it probably is, I don't know statistics, let me pull one out of my ass, it's like 10% of women that can probably actually be like, hey, no, this is not okay.
Right.
That's why we have so much conversation now in modern era about consent. And so the whole thing comes down to, I agree with you, and that is also something that stumbled me, the fact that they're like, well, you have to be able to state whatever, like bullshit. It's against human psychology. Whether or not you believe in psychology, it's against human nature. Sorry. Like, the way that we were created or the way that we have come about, we tend to rationalize things. That's how we let child abuse run rampant. That's how we let murderers get away with murder. That's how we let abusers get away with abuse, is because we rationalize things away because we don't want to deal with them. And you can't fault somebody for that. I don't fault anybody who knew that I was being abused as a kid for not reporting it, because that's their nature. In the same way that a victim is not going to shout out, hey, I need help over here, something's happening, something bad's happening to me. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And like, especially if they were drugged and they don't have the capacity to even do anything. Like, what do they expect? And of course they're going to say, oh, well, they shouldn't have gone out with a worldly person, and that's what happens when you go out to worldly with
they wanted to make
men.
An example of her,
and they point at that and they say, look what happened to so and so, look what happened to this person, this is an example of what happens when you go out with worldly men.
Look what happened to Dinah.
Yeah.
They don't know how to not blame the victim. It is always the fault of the victim. And that is where that issue lies, is that they can't go, wow, this terrible thing happened to you. What can we do to support you? How can we help you? Like, here, we love you, and we want to help you move past this traumatic event. It can never be like that. It's, you did something wrong. Do you know what it is? We're going to punish you for it.
Yep.
That's just how it is. You might as well stone a person, honestly.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They figuratively stone people for being victims.
They do. And I think that there's there's a million follow-ups we could have to that. But like, the culture of secrecy around judicial committees also means that they get to say what elders always say and what the publications always say, which is that we can never really have all the details, because we don't know what happened in that judicial committee. We don't know what was said to the elders. So don't worry about it. Probably some other
She was
secrets, and
she probably deserved it because Jehovah
it probably was her
from
fault, really, in
And
the end.
isn't that the gross thing? Is that they extend that grace to the abusers and not to the abused.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They say we don't know everything that happened to protect the abusers, not to excuse those who may have been abused for making false claims, but to protect the abusers. It's disgusting. It's so gross.
And I remember, at the age of 14, asking my mom, because this was like, I think like either a little bit after I got baptized, or it was, when I was starting, I would always question things. I was always asking why, how, what if, I was always asking questions because I was just a curious child, I guess. And I remember asking my mom at like the age of 14, 15, like, what happens if a woman is raped? What happens then? And, she told me like, oh, well, the publications say if this woman is raped, she would be disfellowshipped. And, the reason why she was disfellowshipped is because she had sex. And I remember thinking, like, even then, like, but it wasn't her fault. I even told my mom that, and I was like, but it wasn't her fault. And she's like, oh, well, she still had sex. So that's why she'd be disfellowshipped.
How pharisaic.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, okay, no, like, Jehovah's a God of love. He wouldn't actually do that. Like, he would, using Holy Spirit, he would intervene. Like, he would not allow that to happen to someone. And then when seeing it happen in real life, like, to someone I knew, I was like, oh, oof. I couldn't imagine it until I actually saw it happen.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is like really important with the conversations around like purity culture in particular is because it's an example of when everybody is doing everything right, harm happens. Like what Watchtower's spin is, well, if everybody just followed all the rules, this wouldn't happen. If both spouses are looking out for each other, there wouldn't be this kind of incompatibility, and everything would work out magically. But like, if you follow all the rules of this specific facet of the organization, like people are getting harmed, they're being psychologically manipulated.
They take away all your individuality, though, when they say everyone just followed the rules like this. Well, we'd all be robots. No one's perfect. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different. We all have our own issues and personalities that we're bringing to the table. So we can't just follow these black and white steps because no matter what, like you said, harm will happen.
Well, and it's gross because they also claim like, God gave us free will. And it's like, is it free will if we're expected to act like androids?
He didn't make us all robots, but I mean, you should follow the rules like a robot.
So instead of him making us robots, you have feelings that resist those actions, and now you have to follow those actions and just suffer.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally fine. Just suffer,
Mm-hmm.
Totally fine.
Well, I mean, there's like approximately 10 million things that we could continue talking about, and
how much of this was usable, though?
I haven't been recording the whole time. This will never air. But no, this has been wonderful, and I plan on doing more conversations like this. I want to have all of you all on again. But it is also late, and I haven't eaten dinner. So
it's 9 where you're
I'm
at.
So hungry.
I know. I have that
6
quesadilla
here.
I've been talking about.
No, it's cold and congealed cheese.
Yeah.
The best. No, so I mean, is there anything that we like that's notable that we skipped over that you feel like we?
There's just so much to talk about.
There's
Honestly, we should do like a
so
6-hour
much.
live stream and just like.
I mean,
We need to break up purity culture into subcategories and then just attack some of those subcategories, because literally, like, we all sent you lists of just like things to discuss, and that takes like an hour each. So
Yep.
I have
Absolutely.
so much to say on sexism in the organization. I had so many, and because I was so opinionated and just so vocal about, what I wanted to do in life, what I was just
Dude,
very
you're such a
opinionated.
woman after my own heart.
And And I remember, like, you know, there were moments where, like, elders would try and correct me, and I'd be like, but no, you're wrong. Like, no.
Yes, and I did the same thing, and it got me so much flack. Also, Jake, are you still recording?
Oh yeah,
Could you cut this part out?
sure.
Yeah,
I
we'll
wanted
say-
to get sign-offs or goodbyes,
boy.
words of wisdom. I don't know. Jenny, what have we learned today? Have we solved it? Have we figured it out?
Well, I think we've learned that our natural impulses, as long as they do not harm other people, are just that. They're natural, and there's no harm in that. And we need to continually work to embrace who we truly are, what our needs are, and be open to those conversations. That's the only way that we can unravel from purity culture.
Wow, people won't know this because I'm gonna cut it out. But like, there was just like a 10-minute conversation about something completely unrelated. I randomly was just like, Jenny, what do you got? And you just like effortlessly summarized everything, like an after-school
Words
special.
came out. I don't
It
even
was
know what to
amazing.
say. Thank you.
Only with Jehovah, Jenny. That was amazing. With the Holy Spirit. No. Cam, what do you got?
I'm not going to be quite as eloquent as Jenny.
That's all right. Me neither.
Obviously, purity culture, it's something that affects so many, and it makes me so angry. So if this helps anyone realize, like, hey, these experiences are not okay, and helps them start to deconstruct their faith, then I count that as a win.
And I think too, like deconstructing after even losing your faith, like realizing how much of that stuff is built into you as you try and like build a new life outside the organization. That we still have to deconstruct this stuff. By golly,
It's a never-ending battle.
it's true. Dax, what did we learn today about purity culture?
Here is what we've learned today. So here's the thing. I understand that the majority of witnesses, about 65%, are women. But if my analytics tell me anything on my YouTube, the majority of people who leave are men. And so the majority of people who are watching this are men. And here's what I will say. Whatever you have learned from the witnesses about how to treat women, throw that shit out. Throw it away. Read a book about how to treat women by a woman, or read articles about how to treat women by a woman, or Knowing Better. Knowing Better is pretty good too. He has a really good video on feminism.
Talk to some women in real life.
Talk to some women in real life, but I'm not
Make
going to
some new
assume that. I'm not
friends.
going to assume that you haven't. But here's the thing: talk to some women who are not also who do not have internalized misogyny, because if you grew up in the organization, you're going to talk to a lot of women who have internalized misogyny, which is going to color your opinion on how oppressed women feel. And if you talk to women outside of the organization, they feel a lot more oppressed than women within the organization will let on. And it is not that women in the organization are not oppressed. They are much more than women in the world, but they are convinced that they are making a sacrifice that God values, and so they will not view it that way. So really, if you're watching this video, and you're probably a man because 80% of you are men, think about the woman in your life and think about your biases against them. It's not that you don't love them, but really dig deep. Like, do you think that maybe they're not as smart as you inherently, or they know less than you inherently, or they're a little bit more naive than you inherently? Really think about that and really assess whether or not that's true.
I would also add, think about how your actions and words may affect the women in your life, and if you might be hurting them unintentionally or intentionally. Just like have a little bit of a thought.
Yeah, have a little.
Yeah, hey,
We got a cat.
the cat concurs.
Ooh, what's the cat's name?
This is Vega. She is a very shy baby who does not like to be around people. So I'm surprised that she's on camera.
We all have shy babies in our homes. That's lovely. And of course, I'm a both sides kind of guy. So next week we'll have men on to talk about why women are wrong. And
There you go.
not
Well,
that
so
long
much
ago.
of it was about like family, like having children, and we had already decided we weren't gonna have kids, so we ended up like not reading it anymore because we're like none of this pertains to us.
We got like partway through the first chapter, and it's like, in this busy environment, sometimes women need to leave the kitchen and enter the workplace. And we were just like,
Oh
okay,
my
we're
god, I
good.
remember that. So, my husband and I never, ever studied together. Not even once.
Damn.
We
And this is
would
on
get
the record
so much
now.
anxiety studying that we just decided, you know what? No, it's not worth
That's
it.
not what we do.
That's not what we do. We can study separately and talk about what we studied in the car on the way to meeting.
There you go.
That's
I
what we do.
had to suggest that with like studying for meetings because I was just like highlight and go. Like I know all this material like the back of my hand. There's
Yeah.
nothing new. I've read all this before. Whereas my spouse would sit and take his time. So like we'd be doing the Watchtower study together, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, it's been 30 minutes and we're only on paragraph 4. Like we have to hurry this up."
And
So eventually we
this
just did that on our own, and we would do other forms of family worship together that didn't involve like studying for meetings because I couldn't
and
handle
that's
it.
why it's a travesty that women don't run the congregation. Meetings would be so much shorter.
Oh my god, they were interminable. I would like count down the
Such a-
paragraphs. I was like, I just want this to be over. Can I go home? I'm hungry.
Well, and
I'm
if-
terrible at math, but I would suddenly be very good at math. Where I'm like, okay, hang on
yeah.
a second. This is a, like
It's like
90-minute
I have-
study.
Yeah.
And we're
I
only
mean,
X amount of minutes in.
I wouldn't study because if I sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say totally off topic, but like, did anybody else just like sit there and world build? Like I did. Like I
Yes,
had
yes.
whole adventures going on during. I'm like, I already
Yes.
know this stuff. I'd like remember to raise my hand and like answer, and then I'd go back to like whatever desert island I'm building a shelter on, and like there's
Yeah.
superhero. Like there'd be crazy
Yes.
stuff going on in my head that
Yeah,
nobody
I'm
was
just like,
thinking of.
I'm gonna go back to working on my novel.
during
in my
during
brain.
conventions, that's what I would do. I would sit with my notebook to make it look like I'm a studious like person, and I would just take notes. Look like I'm taking notes, but really I'm just like writing plot for my novel or
That
coming up
is-
with character
that-
building or
You were not
Yeah.
paranoid enough because I was that person that was so bored that the person sitting below me, I was reading their notes. Because I was like, I wonder what
did
they're
that too.
writing down. I was like, what are they writing? Man, their cursive looks really good. And so the first convention I started paying attention to was 2015, and that's when I learned cursive. I pulled up like a cursive sheet, and I was like, I'm going to take notes, but it's all going to be in cursive, and I'm just going to learn cursive. I learned cursive during that convention, and then every convention since in assembly, I would use it as cursive practice. I didn't care what I was writing down. I was just like practicing my G's, my capital G's, which are
This
really
is
slow.
I was worried
Yeah.
about people reading over my shoulder, so I developed this form of handwriting that is so sloppy and disgusting that like you can't really. I look back at my notes and I can generally decipher it, but for the most part, I'm like, I don't know what this says. I have no idea. But it was just a great way to like nobody knew what I was writing.
I
It was
learned
just so great.
shorthand for that reason. I learned shorthand and I taught my friend shorthand and we would just write to each other.
Oh, that's another thing I would do. Sometimes I would go, so I was in the Portuguese hall, and sometimes I would go to the English hall, right? And I would go to the English conventions with friends who were like, who were English. Blah, blah, blah. I would go to the English conventions with friends who were in the English congregations. And since I had already like heard it before or was going to hear it, my friend and I would like write notes to each other and pass the book back and forth, writing notes to each other, or she would be in her notebook and I would be in my notebook, and we'd just be writing notes to each other the entire convention, talking about boys we had seen during lunch.